So, Lisa, how exactly did the position of your spine help you find freedom and realize your calling?
It's an interesting story. So I had my first child and he was a baby, but I also needed to do something to contribute to my family's income. And I knew I couldn't go back to nonprofit work. It had burnt me out. And I thought, what am I going to do? And I just kept asking for guidance. And this particular week, I was in Svarupa yoga class, and it was the first week that I practiced every single day. And Svarupa, you're using a lot of props. So my spine was extremely straight, the straightest it's ever been in my life. And in class, it was like I got this download. And it was more energetic than all the specifics, but it was clear, like I was to teach people what I did to get into a state of creative flow. And at first I thought
Wow.
at first I thought it meant to teach anybody who wanted to do creative things. So I was starting to offer these workshops with these 5 steps, and it included artists and photographers and writers, but the people who came to me were writers. And so then I
No
changed,
coincidence there.
yeah, I changed my website to say writing coach instead of creativity coach. And then the people who came to me started to really be people who wanted to write a book proposal and get a traditional publishing deal. They wanted help with writing a book, but also especially writing a book proposal. And so then I became a book coach. So it was really my people telling me what they needed.
The teacher.
During that intro with the
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Michael Robert Live, the most entertaining resource for individuals building their dreams. Stay tuned for tonight's mystery story about a strange dream and the tragic events of 9/11. I'm excited to welcome Lisa Tenner back to the show. She's a book coach, publishing expert, award-winning author, speaker, and entrepreneur. Lisa has been quoted in the New York Times, Boston Globe, Glamour, WebMD, Vice, MarketWatch, and more. Her first book received a stellar review in the Chicago Tribune and was featured or reviewed in dozens of other newspapers and magazines. Lisa has appeared on ABC World News, PBS TV, Chronicle, and more. For over a dozen years, Lisa has served on the faculty of Harvard Medical School's continuing education course on writing and publishing books, where she taught workshops on writing, book proposals, and publishing. She also taught writing and publishing workshops for Harvard Medical School's leadership course for women in healthcare. Last but not least, Lisa is a leading authority in book proposal development whose clients have signed 5- and 6-figure book deals with HarperCollins, Random House, Hachette, Beyond Words, New World Library, New Harbinger, St. Martin's Press, Yale University Press, Johns Hopkins University Press, HCI, and other major publishers, as well as being self-published. Her clients are making a difference in the world with their books and their message. They have appeared on Oprah Winfrey, Today, CBS Early Show, Good Morning America, Fresh Air, CNN, PBS, Fox News, in the New York Times, and much more. Lisa's latest book, The Joy of Writing Journal, has won 5 prestigious awards, including the Nautilus and Ben Franklin Book Awards. Lisa, welcome back for Take 2.
Thank you, Julius. That was definitely the long version of my bio that you read.
Oh my goodness! But you left one thing out.
What?
She's been on Michael Robert Live.
Oh, I know.
You could have added that in.
And she's appeared on Michael Robert Live.
There you go.
Definitely add that to the bio.
Someday. So, Lise, we were just talking about your many accomplishments before the camera started rolling and how you've helped so many people. And even your story about how it just came to you to do that. Do you feel a huge sense of accomplishment when other people succeed that you helped? Or more of a sense of accomplishment when you write your books?
That's a great question. I would say the books are an extension of that because I write books that are experiential. I give people experiences. And the way I teach is really empowering people to connect with their creative source, right? And to connect with their answers within. And so it's really an extension of the other ways that I serve people, whether I'm teaching or editing their work or helping them clarify their book concept. My books do kind of the same thing. And it's been really fun to hear back from people how they've used the Joy Writing Journal. I've been kind of shocked at the variety of people who are using it and how they're using it.
What's one of the ways that you didn't think of they'd be using it?
Well, actually, I heard recently somebody reached out and joined my Facebook group, and she said, "We're using your book at work. I work in this school district in Florida, and we're actually for Mental Health Awareness Month. They've given us all a copy of the Joy of Writing Journal. We're working through it every day, and we're actually sharing in our meetings about it." And it was so fun. So I said to her, well, I'd love to talk to the person who put this together. And I said, I'd love to just do a free class for all of you. I'm so thrilled that the journal's being used this way. And so I just gave the class Monday, which was super fun. And they said, we're going to do this for our new hires too. We're going to be using the journal with them as a way to connect people. And she said, and what we love is that not only is this a mental health tool and it boosts mood and it helps people, but that also our people need to write. And this is a great tool for any kind of writing. So I was so thrilled to hear like they're using it in multiple ways and it's actually filling multiple needs because I think like sometimes the most delightful contributions are the ones where you really don't know how people are going to use it. And so they're part of creating what it is, right? Like I didn't just create this book. They're co-creating what it is in the world. So that was so cool.
Yeah, that was totally awesome. And for the kids, because that'll get passed. It's not just them. That will also get passed down to the kids that they're teaching and working with.
No question. And, my dad was an English teacher. My mom taught art, and my brother works in a school. My sister-in-law teaches in a high school. My sister teaches so it's like we're a family of teachers. So to be serving children and education in that way feels really juicy to me.
Yeah, what a perfect time to be doing that.
Yeah.
We
need things like that, right?
We need things that allow people to be creative and expressive and
less out of their minds.
And not on their phone.
Speaking
of
being out of your mind, to back up quite a bit, how did you end up going from being burnt out and suffering from chronic fatigue to a new mom and a published author?
That is a story too. So I was working at a nonprofit. I worked there for 10 years, and pretty early on, I got sick. And at first it was this mysterious illness, and then it got diagnosed as chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia. And I was really on this journey. I didn't know what was causing it. Doctors didn't really know. And so I tried all kinds of healing modalities. And one thing that helped me a lot was polarity therapy. And
what's polarity therapy?
So it was developed by Randolph Stone, who was an osteopath, and he was a naturopath too. He studied in China. He studied Chinese traditional medicine. He studied in India. He studied Ayurvedic medicine. So he combined all these things. And he was also very influenced by Gestalt therapy. So there's like a physical component, a spiritual component to this. There's kind of an emotional and how you talk to yourself within, and I guess, kind of mental so there's kind of like all these different, and a dietary aspect of it as well. So it's a really interesting system. And I just started out by interviewing this person, Doug Jansen, who had a school of polarity in Watertown, Massachusetts at the time. And I was so fascinated, and it helped me heal, that I thought, well, I want to study this, not to become a polarity practitioner, but just because it was so fascinating. And so I did study it for a couple of years. And during that time, I got this idea for this anger book, to help people, instead of addressing their anger in unhealthy ways, to engage their sense of humor, their creativity, and their inner wisdom, to see what's anger's message, and how can I be creative with how I express it, and be productive, right? Like, we don't have to lash out. There are other ways to take the gift that anger can be. So that was, that was sort of how I ended up both healing from chronic fatigue and also really going on this creative march that took me eventually in the direction of becoming a book coach.
And it sounds like you incorporate all those aspects in your coaching when you work with people.
I do, but it is so much more fun to work directly with people's creativity than it is to work with their anger.
Oh, no, I don't mean the anger part.
No, I know.
Yeah, that I would imagine.
But it was, it was like our book came out, The Ultimate Guide to Transforming Anger. And we were teaching these workshops, and people would come, like these men whose wives had sent them because they had an anger problem. And it wasn't really my expertise. I was leaning on my co-author, who was an expert, but it was just not my thing. I just thought, how did I get here doing this? This is not what I'm meant to do. I knew that. But sometimes, we stumble and we take a step that's in the direction of our purpose, but we don't yet know the purpose. And so, there's that value to taking steps, even when you don't know where it's leading, and even where it might be not quite the right thing, it gets you a step closer to where you're going.
Don't fret the why.
Yeah.
Just go with it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you made the switch to the creative part,
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, when you go meditate in your favorite spot
Mm-hmm.
on the water, do you deprogram and create space? Or is that a place where a lot of inspiration comes to you, or both?
Yeah. It's really inspiring for me. And I feel like when I get in nature and I really just allow myself to be present, because I can be like very chatty in my head, right?
That's only you. None of us.
Nobody
do that.
else.
No, it's just you, Lise.
But definitely come from a family of warriors, and there's all of that. So, but when I'm really in nature and letting myself just be in nature, it just comes. And so, this favorite place I have on Casey Point, there's like this path that leads down from the woods, and it meets up with a marshland, and then this what do they call it? I think they call it something like a sea nursery, and it's this brackish water where the baby animals are hatched. So like baby shrimp and baby what are the things that are jellyfish,
Crabs.
baby jellyfish. Maybe I think there are crabs there too, and I think maybe even baby lobsters. I'm not sure of the last one, but I've gone there with my kids when they were little, and Casey Farm has these programs, and we would catch and release with these nets, and see all these baby animals. It's really amazing spot. So it is a very sacred spot, I think, and it is, the land kind of juts out too into the bay. It's very beautiful.
So how important is it when you're coaching people on how to write, that they find their sacred spot?
Yeah, it's crucial. And a lot of times I'll do this guided visualization with people that I call Meet Your Muse. and I'll guide them through this imaginary path. And sometimes I say, just course adjust to let me know if you're not like in the woods. But we go from this meadow to the woods along this path, and they come to a clearing, and then some kind of structure where their muse is waiting. It might be, it might be like a little building, could be a clearing with, trees in it. And inside their muse is waiting, and the muse shows up in whatever way it does. It can be a symbol, it can be a visual thing, an animal, a wise being, but it can also just be a voice or light or just a felt presence that they experience.
And has your muse stayed the same, or does it change?
This is such a great question. My muse is usually similar. She's usually a wise woman, and she's often in these flowing robes, and when I go to her cabin in the woods, she almost always feeds me alphabet soup, which is so perfect for a writer. But sometimes her age has changed, or sometimes, occasionally my muse has been an animal, but she's the most consistent form.
Wow.
But so where was I going with this? That like the inner journey. Oh, so the space can be an external space, and it can also be an internal space, right? And so what I'm creating with people when we do the Meet Your Muse is really a space inside of them, right? Or even in the Joy of Writing journal, that exercise after Meet Your Muse, which there's guided meditation that people can listen to using that QR code with their phone. The next one is about the inner garden, and that one was really fun to create. And it's just about discovering this inner garden as an inner space where you can create.
How cool is that?
So you're diffusing the anxiety around writing.
Making it fun.
Making it fun.
An invitation.
Yeah. Like, let's go.
Let's go. Let's have fun. Let's enjoy writing.
I know, because we were just reading there's an epidemic that people don't smile enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something I naturally do. I've said this 100 times on the show.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say to my wife, wow, look, all these people are always smiling at me. And she says every time, you're a moron. You're smiling at them first, and they're responding to your smile. But okay, everybody, let's start smiling.
Yes.
Let's start this wave of smiling with people. It may seem insignificant, but it really isn't. It's huge.
It is huge. And we smile with our mouths. We smile with our eyes. We smile with our whole being.
And of course, we live on Laughing Hummingbird Farm because
Hey, don't do that.
we absolutely
Now I'm going to have to edit that out. What's the matter? Why are you doing this?
that laughter is one of the most powerful healing tools.
It is. It is. Absolutely.
So to jump in with the anti-laughter, there was a time in your life where you almost didn't become an author. Isn't that true? So the question is, as someone who always loved teaching and writing, did it feel like a deviation from your passion to go to MIT?
So, yeah, I know this comes from a conversation we had earlier, Julius. And it's interesting. As a child, I often wrote, and I thought I'd like to be an author, and I would teach my little stuffed animals and my siblings. Sometimes we play teacher.
Does the stuffed animals talk to you?
No,
they
did
good.
not. But I would. They would just have to listen to me, basically. But then, and I wrote a lot of poetry as a kid, and I read a lot of fiction, and then when I went to college, I took a lot of writing courses, and I had a variety of writing teachers, and some of them were amazing. Gertrude Schnackenberg was a poet I studied with, amazing, and A.R. Gurney Jr. Was a fabulous playwright, and I took many classes with him. So I had lots of great teachers, and one of the best teachers in terms of the craft was Frank Conroy, and he That year, he was the director of the National Endowment for the Arts and Literature. The next year, he actually became the director of the famed Iowa Writers Conference and Iowa Writers Workshop. Whoops. And he taught me so much about editing. I still hear him in my head, when I'm editing, like it's the things he taught me. But he was not very, he was really disdainful, I think, of the MIT students. And he actually had a favorite protege who he brought to class. The person wasn't even an MIT student. And we spent most of our time talking about that person's work. So he was really the opposite of nurturing. And it took me a long time. Somehow I internalized that. And, it showed me the power of a teacher, that we can either turn people on or turn people off. We can build them up and help them feel confidence, or we can tear them down. And I, always think of that when I give people feedback, because I can be, I don't think I'm critical in a negative way, but I can tell people all the things they need to change. And I always have to remind myself, make sure you're balancing it with all the things they're doing right, because that's actually more important. And it's not just more important because you want to make them feel good. It's more important because that's where their strength is. They're not, the things that you're showing them that maybe they're doing wrong or need to change, those can be good lessons. But the deeper thing is really finding the gold in what they're already doing and
tapping their inner energy source to really go after the things they need to do better.
Yeah. So it's a big responsibility to teach people and coach people. And we need to do that with humility and care.
But you do that from what feels like a very unconventional approach, because most people I know, when they take writing lessons, it's more mechanical or analytical, where it seems like your coaching brings people to their own source and their own strength.
It's a big piece of it. And, I used to teach my Bring Your Book to Life program. And there I was trying to cram in all the things you needed to know and do to write a good book. And there was a lot to learn. And so what I decided to do this year is I just took all those course materials and I put them on this website for my Get Your Writing Done program. And people can access that, right? And all the recordings are there and the PDF with all the exercises. But when I'm teaching, I'm just leading people through an experience, and it's so much more fun. I used to try to cram so much information into a class. Now they can just listen to that part. And then in class, we have these experiences, and then people get to ask their questions. And when they ask their questions, sometimes they say something useful. It's just
sometimes.
This morning, somebody had sent me an email, someone from Get Your Writing Done, and he said, a wise person gave me this, amazing advice, and he attached it in PDF, and I opened it up, thinking, I wonder who this wise person was, and it was me, and it was just so heartwarming to realize, that my answer to his question was something that really made a difference for him. So it was fun to get that back. So but it's much more fun to teach, I think, answering people's questions than it is to have this whole agenda of, okay, we're going to squeeze in everything you need to know about writing for an audience and figuring out who that is. They can do those exercises, but I want to really connect more and be more spontaneous and have more fun. So I'm really enjoying
which I think is a really powerful way to approach this. And it stimulates two stories with me.
Mm-hmm.
The first being, like you, oh my God, when I started out, I wanted to ram in every single fact that I could find and that I knew and that I would impress the audience with everything I knew.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, they were falling asleep and not hearing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I evolved to the point where I was giving a presentation, and if I was given an hour, I'd only speak for 20 minutes. And then I would open it up, and my segment would always go over
Mm-hmm.
because people would be asking me questions that are important to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I never gave a presentation the same way. And I
Yeah.
was trained to do that. I was handed in those days a slide projector
Uh-huh.
and the slides and the script
Right.
and told, do not deviate. Don't even change the order of the slides. Tell the same thing. So by my first luncheon, I prayed no one would show up.
Wow.
I literally prayed no one would show up. Sure enough, the table was set for 50 and one gentleman showed up.
He didn't get the prayer memo.
He didn't get the prayer memo. Where were you? And I just sat down and started chit-chatting.
Oh, what a great way to start. That was a gift to you, wasn't it?
The whole thing. And I realized in that moment, it was all those questions, not my ego having to show everything that I know, but it wasn't about me. It was all about him. I knew the answers. He didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it was from that moment on, I never, ever gave two presentations alike. And I would go out into the audience before I started to speak
Uh-huh.
and just start asking different people questions.
Yeah.
I did this with every presentation for 20 years. Got to know them a little bit, because you get that general feeling of what the group came together, not by accident. There are no coincidences. Right. So there had to be shared beliefs and questions among these people. And my whole presentation would be geared towards the specific group. And I would just talk.
And it's intuitive when you work that way, right? It's like you're not in performance mode. You're not thinking so much. You're not so linear, but you really allow yourself to show up fully. And
be in the moment.
When we do that, we are more inspired and inspiring.
So my biggest accolade or pat on the back was when the oldest person in the room would come up to me afterwards and say, "Oh, thank you so much, dear. I really could understand everything." And this was an investment product.
Yeah.
I could really understand the investment.
Wow.
And then that would tell me, boom, I nailed it. Because not what I was sharing in a specific order, but I answered the questions of everyone in that room.
Wow.
So let me ask you,
Mm-hmm.
when you're going to sit down and write that book, is it more important to come up with the questions to yourself or live in that anxiety of, oh my God, how am I going to start? What is it that I really want to say? Is it about quieting your mind?
Mm-hmm.
This is just coming to me, sitting here in your space, and just let it flow as to what the questions, like what my specific questions are to myself.
Mm-hmm. It's a great way to work, and I know people who work that way with questions, and so it's one really terrific way to write. It is helpful to get into the mind of the reader, and sometimes it's good to ask them questions if you don't know your readers that well. one of the most important things is, well, I won't say this. One of the most important things often, usually, is having an outline and having a really detailed outline, because then you know where you're going and it has a structure, even if the structure changes, which it often does. But having some kind of structure is really helpful for your book. But having said that, structure will often change, but it still helps to have had it. And sometimes people don't write from structure, and they just get an editor who's really great at finding the gems and moving it into the right places, and they fix it up for you. Or some people just have that ability to take their sort of thoughts that are stream of consciousness, or, a list of questions, and then turn that into something organized themselves. So process really varies. There's not one way to write a book, but you're right that you don't want to write from anxiety. That's not going to work. And anxiety is going to produce maybe a lower form of product, for want of a better word. But at the same time, if you are writing from anxiety the first time, okay, give yourself a break. You're feeling anxious, and then just let yourself write that first draft, and you'll work with it, and it'll get better and better. But if you are feeling anxiety, you might want to, we talked about dancing. You might want to dance first, or you might want to do some Qigong, which we sometimes do, and get your writing done. You can do some breath work. There are all kinds of fun things you can do to get in that space where you're creative and in a state of flow, and you feel inspired and things calm. So I would say if you're feeling anxious, go for a walk in nature, do something, move, dance, skip, as you said. But do something that's going to make you feel good, and you'll write better.
All right, can I jump in for a minute with a
Yeah.
couple comments? Gail says hello, and Soham says, I love Lisa's smiles. Her smile always makes me feel like there's no worry in the world.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm also, if you have any questions for Lisa or Michael throughout the show, who's Michael? Please go ahead and put them in the comments, and we'll bring them up. Or you can call in at 401-787-3995 and ask us questions live. I know there are some of you in the audience writing books, so if you have any questions or are stuck in the process, Lisa's the person to ask.
Now, I hear you have some books in mind.
Yes. But I have one question, then we'll get to that.
Okay.
What advice do you give someone who's looking for an editor?
So first I find out what kind of book it is. Is it fiction, nonfiction, narrative, prescriptive, children, adults? Because you're going to want, not always, there's some people who are really broad in their abilities and their experience, but you want somebody who's worked with that genre before, and they're really good at. They've seen a lot, and they know what works and what doesn't, and what publishers like to see if the person is looking for a traditional publisher. So I would say, find somebody who's right for you. Recently, a former client of mine called me, and she wanted to work with me again, but this time she's writing a children's book. And I said, I can tell you two really great people who work with children's books, and they're going to be really helpful. But, that's not my area. So find somebody who's in that area. That's important. And know what's going to work for you. Like if you need nurturing, be sure that you're hiring somebody who is more nurturing than critical. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to give you valuable information to improve. But if they're just critical, that could really hurt that creative part of you inside. So know what you want too. Do you want somebody who's going to talk with you on the phone? I know some editors who will not talk on the phone with clients. They only do it all in writing. They might use Google Doc or
surprise.
Microsoft Word. And I would like to, as personally, when I have an editor, I like to hear them talk to me about the writing too. So I don't just want it in writing. I want to speak with them. So, that's an important consideration too. And, get referrals. That's always helpful. Somebody that has helped others.
Julius, do you have a question?
Are you conveniently avoiding her questions? So we'll get back
I'm
to it.
postponing it as long as I can.
Okay, I'll let you postpone
I
it
hope
a
this
little
isn't
longer.
anxiety.
No, not at all.
So I'll let you postpone it a little bit longer because I do have a question.
Okay.
To get back to the nurturing versus criticalness thing,
Hmm.
those who work with me know I went on a criticalness rally these last couple days.
Oh.
Because for some reason I'm very critical of everything. I see what's wrong more than I see what's right, and I want to fix it. And I guess I struggle with finding the balance between putting the head in the sand and saying what it is, what needs to get better and what doesn't. So I guess I pose the question to both of you for myself. It's so easy to be critical.
Hmm.
It's so easy to just rail at people and go on and on. And it's just true.
And on and on and on.
So, with the two of you sitting here, what would you tell me? How do I address that?
So was this self-critical or critical of others or both?
Both.
Yeah, which is common, right? The way we talk to ourselves is the way we talk to others. It requires taking a step back and reminding ourselves, like, let's celebrate what's working. And I think one thing that's sort of lucky for me as a coach is that when I hear about people's books, I do see the possibilities. So even if they come to me with a half-baked idea that doesn't sound like it would sell, I often have ideas for them that might make it really work. And I also listen to them because maybe I'm wrong, right? So I've got to really fully listen. So some of it is, kind of opening your mind a little bit to what's possible, I think, and really seeing, like, what is this person's strengths, whether it's you're talking to, right? What are my strengths? What can I celebrate that I did right? Because also failing and making mistakes is part of life. And, did this person make mistakes because they just don't care or they're in a hurry? Or was it more that
Option A.
they needed more training or something? So, ask more questions before you get upset, and remind yourself too, like, failure is its own success in a way, right? It's one step closer to success. So we're not going to be successful in everything we do. Our failures are going to teach us sometimes more than our successes.
Know the person and don't ask the person for something they can't deliver. I had a friend. She was always at odds with her mom. And finally, one day, I just looked at her and I said, very lovingly, your mom will never be able to deliver that to you. And she started crying.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, I guess I've hit that chord. And I said, look, your mom's another human being. As much as we want our parents to be perfect and live up to unrealistic standards.
Hey,
Now, are you the person who made the mistake?
One of them. And I said, look, your mom is great at this, this, and this. No.
For the record, I wasn't angry at my mom, but go ahead.
But you know what? We have a running joke in our family where I would call one of my sisters up and say, just once, wouldn't you love for mom to say when you called up and said, hey, mom, how are you? Wouldn't you, instead of saying, how come you didn't return my call? It's 3 days. I haven't heard from you. Just once. Wouldn't you love her to say, Oh, honey, how are you? You know, I was looking at that beautiful artwork that you produced when you were a kid today. Not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did I question my mother's love for me? No. But did I want her to be this perfect, like TV show mom that was all loving and happy? And it's when I realized it's not her way.
Yeah.
Everyone has their way.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the office, even in any organization you're participating in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's your job to figure out who that person is and, have a good working idea of what they're capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And like
nothing.
And like you, like you were saying earlier, you've got to balance the criticism with praise.
Yes.
Well, you have to know what you can expect from that person and create the environment where that person will just flourish and give you, like when managers always complain about people who work for them. I don't want to hear it. You hired the wrong person. You didn't take the time to figure out if that person had the innate qualities and knowledge to do the job that you were asking them to do. It's not the person.
Yeah. And, that kind of brings us back to that idea of if it's yourself that you're being critical of, is, maybe there's skills you need to learn and master. And, so you go and do that. Or maybe this particular piece of the job isn't for you. So as an entrepreneur like you are, Julius, you get to delegate. You get to hire other people or find a volunteer. But, you don't always have to do everything. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes of entrepreneurs. And I know that it's still a mistake I make at times. But, it is to try to do everything yourself. And most entrepreneurs do too much of that. And we just have to remind ourselves, oh, yeah, I could hire someone for that, and they'll probably do it faster and better. So why am I doing this? So there's if you are doing the self-criticism, there's something to remember.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to ask another question before we get to the question you're avoiding. Can you remember the most difficult day from working at the nonprofit? And what was the nonprofit?
Oh, it was Hospitality Homes. And they have a network of volunteer hosts. When people go to Boston for medical treatment of a family member, they host the family members in the home while, let's say, the child or spouse is in the hospital.
Oh.
It's a really wonderful organization. And it's in Boston, but we trained people all parts of the country who started similar programs. So it was fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was the most difficult day from that point in your life?
Oh my gosh, the most difficult day. There were a lot of difficult days. I mean, in the beginning, we just had no money. And, I took this job. I was in a really horrible job, corporate job that was just not a match for me. And I had the boss from hell. And it was just no good. And I thought, this is an amazing organization and I really want to lead it. Sounds so exciting. And I was thrilled. It made me an offer and then so I quit my job and I gave notice, and then a board member called me and said, Lisa, if I were you, I wouldn't take this job. If you were my daughter, I would advise you not to take this job. And I said, what? She said, I just felt I had to tell you this. And I'd already given notice. So I thought, well, I'm out of a job and this looks good. I'm just going to take it and hope for the best. But it was really hard because we really, the board was dysfunctional. And luckily, they had applied for a grant, and the grants making organization, the Boston Foundation, called us in like a few weeks into the job. And I looked at the grant. I was so embarrassed because it was clearly a terrible proposal. But they said to us, you need board development work. And here's the name of a great consultant. Her name is Sue Carent, and she's going to help you develop that board. And that's what you need to do. And so, and Sue was amazing. I think our first, she said, just raise $1,200. I think it was for the very first piece of work for her to do with us. And so we got a board member to donate that. And I learned so much from Sue and from the board members that, were real leaders in the organization. And we turned that organization around. But it was really scary at first. And I had school loans. I had college loans. I'd gone to MIT undergrad and for graduate school. And I had to put off paying I could only pay the interest on it. I couldn't pay the principal. So I, that was a scary move to make. So I would say that was a really scary time, but it was an amazing job. I learned so much. And the people, both the hosts who opened their homes generously and the people who came all that way for a family member's medical treatment, everybody was so inspiring. And the hospitals too. There were some really great people we worked with in the hospitals. So it was really rewarding.
Oh, awesome.
All right, now you can't escape your question any longer. What questions do you have about your book?
My book, this infamous book that's hung over my head for 5 years.
Or books.
Or books. What really is my message? Can I really get it across well enough to reach the audience that I want it to reach?
Mm-hmm.
Just why are some books so successful and other books kind of just sit on the shelf?
Uh-huh.
And, the first one has to be a New York Times bestseller. So, I know it's take the first step and write a little bit every day. And you've told me about meeting my muse to do it. To do the things I know I need to do.
Do you like writing?
I like talking more.
So, there are ways to talk your book.
Right.
But the way to do that is to have a really solid organization, to figure out what are the stories I want to tell, what are the points I want to get across, and really organize the book chapter by chapter before you do the talking. And then just give little talks. You could give a talk to Julius. You could have Julius in the room with you.
He would criticize me way too much.
Not Julius.
Nor Peggy.
You can
No, I'm kidding. I'd be happy to help.
I'll give it to Shodsen. She doesn't speak English.
There we go. But give a talk, but make sure you're following all the points in the order that you had, because that's going to give it structure. And the people who just try to talk a book, usually they're not so great, because a book is different from a speech. And so you really want to develop what you have. I mean, the other thing is, I love helping people write their book themselves, but I also do work with a bunch of ghostwriters. It just so happened that people would come to me about ghostwriting, and I met some really great ghostwriters. So I started to refer them, and now I actually have a whole piece on my website about finding you a ghostwriter. And so, that's an option too. If you really don't like to write, is have somebody interview you and go back and they'll write it. And, you don't have to be embarrassed about that. You can even say on the cover by Michael Robert Piernunzi, with so-and-so. So, and the with is smaller, but it gives credit to the person who worked with you as a co-writer. So it's still your ideas, but they're helping distill it for people. So I'm not saying you should hire a ghostwriter, but I'm just saying there are lots of options. And when you put so much pressure on yourself that it has to be New York Times bestseller or has to be perfect, that's just going to keep you from writing it. And is that fair to the people who need your message?
Ooh. No, but I'm you've really got me excited to outline it and talk it.
Great.
Done. Now,
Well, wait a minute. I have a plethora of questions now. However,
Okay.
how does one who doesn't want to outline go about outlining? Because I think outlining, you can come up with what you want to say in the stories you want to tell, but then to like make the book compelling or anything compelling, there has to be like a flow of the stories, and then is it fiction or nonfiction, and is it narrated? Is it characters? Is it just a thing of stories? I mean, obviously you get to choose, but how do you choose?
can I just say this for me?
Yeah, sure.
Two things that Lisa has said tonight have really inspired me. And that is just write the first draft, organize it, and tell the stories. I could do those where he's saying, I don't want to write the outline. What's
I'm not saying that.
No. What's overwhelming
I'm insinuating it, but I'm not
would
saying
to
it.
be, I've got to write the outline and then write the book. For someone who enjoys speaking more than writing, although I'm told I'm a very good writer, that I could do and not worry about anything, just get the first draft, because I actually like editing more than I like.
Oh, that's great.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
writing.
fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's a great trait to have. That'll make it easier.
So
Julius.
how is artificial intelligence affecting writing? Because like this video will be transcribed by a piece of software. And any titles we do going forward will be seen by ChatGPT. So the world is changing rapidly, and especially in the world of creation. How is artificial intelligence? Because, why would you need a ghostwriter then? If he narrated his book and we fed it into a transcriber and then he edited it, that could work too, right?
Yeah, it's possible that at some point it could get good enough to do that. I do think that there's something inherent in human beings that you're not going to get with AI. I'm also really concerned. I think AI is an extremely dangerous technology, and it's not a question of whether it can be misused. It's just when. So I think if we don't act now to put some real guardrails around it, which it looks like we're not acting soon enough, and not being very smart about it. And you can't have the people creating these AI technology. You can't have those people policing themselves and saying, "Oh yeah, please police us. It's it has the potential to be dangerous, but we won't do anything bad." I mean, that's just crazy. It's insanity. So yeah, I'm just very concerned about AI, and it goes way beyond writing. I'm not as concerned about the writing part. Is that, of course, I mean, the writing part, one of the two challenges, is one, AI can say anything and it can be all BS. And, garbage in, garbage out. And if you feed a computer all kinds of foundational information that it's working from, it's biased. And one of the great things about humans is we can be biased, but we also have this incredible capacity to be open-minded and to change our minds and to learn new things. And of course, AI is trained to learn new things, but whatever you do in that foundation can, it is, we don't even, I think, realize like how much that could influence how AI ends up working. But yeah, I as somebody who went to MIT and is also a bit of a Luddite, I'm hearing danger, danger.
Will Robinson.
Will Robinson, that's it.
Lost in Space. Have you seen that?
I've
It's a
seen
very-
2001: A Space Odyssey.
No.
This is a very old TV show.
Oh my God, I was addicted to that show. And I had a robot, one of the toy robots,
Yeah.
and just always wanted to be Will Robinson.
So, Lisa, on the call earlier, you said to me that challenges help us grow.
Mm-hmm.
What challenges in your life spurred the most growth for you?
Probably it would be parenting. I mean, that's got to be the biggest challenge there is, right? Raising another human. And it pushes us. I mean, I think our children, no question, push the buttons that most need to be pushed, right? And if we don't let ourselves change, if we're not open-minded and we don't learn to trust and stop trying to control or manage our children, and now I'm using all these double negatives. I'm all confused myself. But anyway, if we can avoid, if we let me try to say this a different way. If we can be open-minded about the things our children are doing and teaching us, and maybe not always think that we have the answer. Or, for me, I think one of the biggest things was, if my child's not eating healthy, I'm a bad mother, right? So therefore I have to beat it into him. I'm not physically, right? But I would beat the point home about, why he had to eat this healthy food or something. Arguing with a kid is just a hopeless, you don't want to go there. So, I really had to learn to let go, and maybe, what you learn is that child has their own path, and I don't know what that path is. And maybe they need to make certain mistakes. Of course, everybody needs to make certain mistakes to have the lessons they're here to learn. So I think those are the biggest lessons I got in life, is through parenting. And of course, there's so much joy with parenting too.
It's both ways. You get one or you get the other.
Hmm.
It feels like every day I wake up and there's a new challenge for me to deal with. There are minor challenges in the grand scheme of things, but every challenge feels like a mountain that you can never quite reach the top of. But 2 months later, you get to the top of it. But it needed to be done. Anyway, I want to
Just
go ahead.
so parents, it's like the book having to be the New York Times bestseller thing.
Yes.
So we put this incredible pressure, guilt, anxiety on being the perfect parent. Like there's some award you're going to get at the end of the year, Perfect Parent of the Year award, all in our heads. And like you were saying, it just gets back to loving yourself enough so you don't let guilt slip into what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
And your child chose you. So whatever it is your truth is, that's really just the message that they're looking for from you.
And the most important thing we can do is love them.
Love them.
So, we all do that, right? So it's a win. And of course, there's more you want to do to nurture them, but making them wrong, or, making sure that you protect them in every way, that's not realistic. And it's also very performance oriented, right? We are a very performance oriented culture, but I think when we get away from that and we can say, oh, well, that's an interesting choice he's making. I wonder how that's going to play out. If he asks, I can tell him why. And of course, if I feel it's dangerous, then it's important to tell him, but to say something and let go, right? And not to say it with judgment, or to say it with all this kind of trying to control.
Or unsolicited advice.
Yes. Now, of course, our kids are teens, or I have one in his 20s. So, of course, when they're really little, you have to do a lot more directive parenting. But, we're at a stage where our kids, we've got to let them make those mistakes.
Exactly.
When they're little, yeah, you have to be a little bit more involved. But even there, it's good to realize when is the time to step in and when is it time to let them trip over that object, or whatever it is.
And you're their parent. Your role is not their friend.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've seen that over and over again. You're the parent. This is the dynamic that you chose and they chose. So when you start deviating from that dynamic, I think it gets a little too gray and a little too unstructured.
Mm-hmm.
And like you were saying, when kids are young, I believe they need structure.
Yes, yeah. No question.
I'm going to jump in here into the live Q&A section. Thank you for staying with us so far. If you have a question for Lisa, let me know. But in the meantime, I have some pre-written questions for you.
Okay.
So, what is the most profound moment you have had journaling, and how does it help you in your life?
The most profound moment I've had journaling. Wow. I don't know if there's just one, but I would say journaling. I'm trying to think. I know you want to ask this other question, so I'm trying to be careful not to.
No, go ahead.
Go
Break
ahead.
the
Okay.
rule. Break the rule.
So break the rule. Here we go. So one of the most profound things for me is when I wake up, journaling my dreams, writing down the dream as I remember it, and then kind of dialoguing with it. I might dialogue with a dream character. I might just kind of do some oddball things with it, like imagine what happens if this happened instead, or I might just make some notes about what some of the symbolism seems to mean to me, and then sort of have some ahas. And then from there, sometimes a poem comes out of it, sometimes a story, short story, and sometimes I move on to a book that I'm working on. But it often is, dreams can be so profound because they have all these multiple levels of meaning and they're so creative, and they can really create deep change within. So I would say that dream journaling is especially valuable.
And that's the perfect segue into the mystery story. So was that one of the profound journaling moments for you?
Oh, the mystery story. Okay. So you mean with 9/11?
With 9/11.
Yeah, that was really profound, and it was July 2000. Was it 2001? 9/11? Yeah.
Yes.
No, yeah. Yeah. So it was July, and I had this dream that I was exiting for the side door of my parents' house. And as I stepped out, I was actually exiting a helicopter, and it was like this bedlam, and there was fire all around. And I turned to a policeman and said, "What's happening?" And he said, "It's the fundamentalists, and New York City is a war zone." And I thought, what does that, I didn't know what that meant, but I walked away, and then I went into this cave with these women that I knew, that we were like a spiritual community, I would say. And I went into the cave, and all the women were standing around holding a candle, and we had agreed to hold space for this event and to hold a space for love and peace. And so I joined the women in the circle, and there we were holding this space and holding our candles. And I woke up and I knew it was an important dream. And so I wrote it down, and then I promptly forgot about it. And then when I met with that group again, suddenly one of them had said something about what if, like, has anybody had any interesting dreams? And I suddenly remembered the dream that I'd have about 9/11. This was after 9/11, and I shared it with the community and how we had all created that space for it. But what happened on the day of September 11th was that a friend called and said, and we were both had babies and we were nursing our babies. And she called me and said, "Oh, you've got to turn on your TV and you've got to see the Twin Towers has been hit." And just, I had this gut reaction of, no, I can't see that. I need to hold a place for peace. And this song came to me, this prayer, and I just sang it all day. And I nursed my baby, and I tried to hold a space for peace. And I think if I'd watched the TV, I would not have been able to hold that space. But even then, I hadn't remembered the dream. It was only when I was with these women that I remembered it. And I went back to my folder because I had written down a place where I wrote down my dreams, and I found the dream and reread it. And it was just amazing to see how that had happened beforehand. But I think I'm not alone. So many people had prophetic dreams about 9/11 because, physics tells us, right? Particle physics tells us that time and space are a construct and that they're not really real. So it kind of blows my mind. I don't fully understand it, or even partially understanding, I think. But I think that's where sort of prophetic information comes from. And what my understanding is that prophetic dreams and things like that, it's about probabilities. It doesn't mean that things definitely going to happen, and certainly not exactly as you dream it, like I wasn't coming out of a helicopter, but that it's giving us information about what's possible in the future. And for me, it helped me create that sacred space that I think I must have had a contract to do that in this lifetime.
How awesome. It was very interesting to hear that, because what are the odds of that? Even though the odds are there, they're probably very, very small.
Yeah, and I guess one other thing I'll say is that if I had watched the towers burn, I think it would have been hard not to feel victimized and to feel enraged maybe at the people who did it. And I think holding a place for peace required holding place for peace for everyone, not just the victims, but also the perpetrators. And so I think that healing needs to come from a more neutral space that we can't always access, in the height of emotion. So sometimes it's helpful to know that. And just because something happened doesn't mean you have to read the newspaper and find out everything that happened in a tragedy or watch it on TV a lot of times. Sometimes it's better to go within or within community to for healing.
It's not about judging the situation and taking a side.
Mm-hmm.
When you know that everyone in this world is playing a role, whether you agree with that role or not, we're all part of this humanity,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody has their piece. Very difficult concept
Yes.
to wrap your head around.
And, in that moment, I was holding a place for peace, but there are many moments in my life where I have actually been contributing to the opposite of peace, right? So it's also not about like, oh, I'm this great person who holds a place for peace, because there are many things that I've done in my own family that have created conflict.
Right.
So, I think that's important. Like, as you said, we've got it all inside us. And when we can be compassionate to all the parts of ourselves, then we can be compassionate to all the parts of others, and vice versa.
Exactly. But it must start with that compassion and love for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, the other stuff isn't deep enough or real enough. You still have too much of the doubt and the ego in even giving that love or compassion.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And the last thing that I'll say is we're all part of this benevolent network. And we forget it so often, especially during a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
If you just reach out to yourself, not judge, not feel like you have to take a side or a stand,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when you allow yourself to feel connected, to feel part of the benevolent network that we call humanity is here to help.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note,
No, wait a minute. We're not done yet. And I know we're a little over time, but I want to bring up one thing. Steve, hi, Steve. How are you? Steve said 9/11 was a dream. And then he wrote, I lost 2 people in the towers. Steve, we're sorry to hear that.
Yes, I'm sorry to hear that.
It was a terribly tragic day. I was alive, but very, very young, 5 years old.
And I agree with Steve. I was watching it I came home to Rhode Island to visit my friends, my parents, and we're in
Don't
there.
confuse the two.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
And Smarty. We were having coffee, and the TV was on in their kitchen. And like Steve, I didn't think this was real.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was some dream or movie that I was watching.
Mm-hmm.
It was not computing in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I heard about was it 3,000 people that died? Just, it doesn't matter what the number is.
I'll get a number.
Even if it was 1.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of anger and resentment, and there was nothing I was feeling anywhere near a benevolent network in that moment.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's when I needed to feel it the most.
Mm.
So if you feel like it's a dream, you have control of that dream. You have control of your reaction or your relationship with the dream. And if none of this is really real, and it's all here to make you very conscious of your relationship with a person or an event or an opinion or a belief, we don't have to take it so seriously. We really don't. And like you were saying, when you don't do that, you give yourself the space, you can step back and really experience your relationship with the event or the person. Because you're asking, you created that event. We all did. On some level, we all created 9/11. A group psyche that had this happen. And, what did that mean to you?
Mm.
What did you feel vulnerable, betrayed? Like, what was it? Have you ever really taken a look at that? And I think from the smallest thing of people you meet on the street, from a single smile to major crisis, it's really important for you personally to step back and observe your relationship with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only when you do that first that you can come up with the actions that will be for your highest good and the people who are involved in the thing that you are looking at your relationship with. And you can't ask any more of yourself than that.
So the exact number of victims, particularly the number of those killed at the World Trade Center, is definitely not known. However, the official death toll, after numerous revisions and not including the 19 terrorists, was set at 2,977 people.
I thought it was about 3,000 people.
19, add 19 to that if you want to include the terrorists, and 343 of those people were firefighters. Steve's last comment, and then we need to get back to the rapid fire questions, but I don't feel right ending this without finishing the conversation about it. But Steve said it was very real for me.
Yeah, and I think, I think that, our experiences on Earth are very real for us. So I don't think, I'm certainly not saying that it's not real, and that or even something Pollyanna-ish about healing. I mean, loss is one of the hardest lessons we have here on Earth, I think. And it is very real, and I think, it's one of the most emotional things we go through. And I think it's I'm just thinking of somebody in my life who's going through a very hard time, who lost their father, as a child. So I think, we need to have compassion for each other, and that one story is going to mean something to one person and it's going to mean something to somebody else. And what happened to me that day doesn't lessen what happened to somebody else, which might be a profound loss or more than one.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm going to get back to the rapid fire questions to take a left turn on this conversation. So, how did it? We went over that already. What are your hopes for the future of the journal, Lisa?
Well, after working
that was a smooth segue, wasn't it, from one thing to the next thing? But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, after working with the school district, I would say just working with more schools would be really fun, and just wellness, working with other workplaces, using the journal in a wellness environment would be fantastic. So that got me excited thinking about that. But I think my readers will show me where else I guess we're meant to go. But it's fun. I never realized how the book would decide where it's meant to go more than sort of my efforts, or hiring a publicist to sort of bring it to the world. It's sort of been more organic than that, I think.
Well, I just made an executive decision that it will certainly be part of our academies.
Oh, thank you. That's very exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I would be happy to donate the books.
Okay, great. Write that down, Julius.
Yes, I have it. So if someday I decided to write a book, what are 3 tips you would give me for fiction or nonfiction writing?
Well, let's start with nonfiction because that's really my area of expertise. So 3 tips. You've decided to write a book. Number 1 is really be clear about why you're writing it. Because if you're not clear, then you're probably going to write the wrong book, and also you're going to lose steam. So really be clear why you're writing it and make sure that you want to write it. And the second is you're going to have to take something off your schedule to make the time for it. So figure out what you're giving up. It might be, or moving down in priority, because you're going to have to make space for it. And the third is really understand who you're writing it for. Because when you can write to that person, or, maybe a group of people, but you write as if you're writing to one person, it will be more intimate, it will be more powerful. And when you really understand who that is, then you're going to write what they need to hear. So those are 3 tips for nonfiction.
And to continue down the rapid fire list, what should I look for when choosing a book writing or publishing coach?
So first of all, if you're looking for a book writing or publishing coach, look for somebody who has expertise in the area you want to write. For instance, don't look to me for a children's book, but look to somebody who has worked with children's books. So that's number 1. And the second is read the testimonials and figure out what they've done for other people. And you could even ask for references, but find out what results people are getting, and are those the results you want to get. And the third is trust your gut. Talk to the person and find out more about their orientation, and really listen. If you're feeling a red flag, even though they're saying all the right things, listen to your gut.
So what is your favorite area of expertise?
My favorite? I love books that really help people transform. So I would say, transformative, self-help, or spiritual books. I love working on books like that.
And our lives are ever so crowded with tasks and deadlines. Amidst the sea of madness, how do you find the time to sit down and write? And is it even worth it anymore with all the books available today?
Oh, of course it's worth it. But yeah, how do you find the time to write? It's the perennial question. And, I would say part of it is just making it the priority. So maybe do it first thing when you wake up. So you could go to bed half an hour earlier or an hour earlier, and then wake up half an hour earlier or an hour earlier and make your writing the first thing. So that's one way to do it. Another is to give something up. Are you going to give up some TV time or video game time or even something that you consider very productive, but to let go of that so that you're actually putting the book first or high priority. And when other things come up, which they inevitably will, always ask yourself, if I say yes to this, what is it going to do for my book? Especially if somebody invites you to a party, but that's the very time you're supposed to be writing and you plan to write. Ask yourself, like, what is this going to do for my book if I say yes to it? So that way you're really getting clear that you're making a choice between two things. It's not just jumping at what sounds fun, but it's like, is it worth getting behind on the book to do this thing? Or can I just go to the next party after I've written the book?
Wait a minute. I have to be an adult while I'm writing the book?
It helps. It helps. But you can also let your inner child run free too. It's a little of both.
And the final question, what was the most enlightening experience you had speaking with a publisher, and what do they look for?
Oh, wow. Most enlightening experience. Well, I could think of one time when I was speaking to a publisher, and the client's book, he had this wonderful tool that worked with anxiety, depression, and addiction. And the publisher said, maybe other publishers have luck selling a book that deals with all of those, but what we find is our readers want one thing. So make the book all about one thing, and we think the best would be anxiety for our audience. So it made me realize that often when you go more narrow, you actually get a bigger audience because it's more clear. This is the book I need. This is for me and the problem I have. So certainly when we're talking about self-help or how-to books, prescriptive books, that is a really important thing to remember.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And by the way, Steve, I see your comments, and I'm going to bring them up in a minute. I have not forgotten about them. Oh my God, we are so over time. But I have to ask the signature question. If you could share a story or two with your great-great-great-grandchildren, what would they be?
Oh, wow. I'm getting really tired, I have to say.
Yeah, I know. It's the last question I asked.
A story or two with my great-great-grandchildren. I don't know. I mean, one might be just like some of the greatest things. I mean, in my life, I think about giving birth, like maybe it's the story of the birth of if they're my great-great-grandchildren, then their great-grandfather would be one of my sons. So I guess it might be that, because that was just such a miracle for me.
Awesome. Well, Lisa, thank you very much for joining us on the show tonight. And I'm going to leave us with one quote from a favorite author of mine. I solemnly swear that I am up to no good. Do you know who wrote that?
I don't, but if I had to guess, maybe Mark Twain?
No, I'm being much less intellectual. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that, but J.K. Rowling in Harry Potter.
Oh. Very good. You stumped me.
Lisa, thank you very much for joining us on the show tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you both for having me.
Thank you.
And Steve, we'll address some of your top comments on next week's show. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Good night, everyone.